Hey friend, Chris Vandeviver here from WhyLogicProRules.com, the website that helps you get the most you can out of Apple's Logic Pro 10. In this week of 10.5, we've been examining each of the huge new features that have come with the most recent update. Starting on Monday, we checked out the new Live Loop section, which is a huge innovation to Logic Pro 10. After that, we checked out the new step sequencer for programming different software instrument patterns. After that, we checked out the new Quick Sampler instrument that allows us to quickly and easily just plug in a sample, be able to fine-tune it and start playing. And after that, we checked out the brand new sampler, the rebranded, refreshed, new modern EXS24. Today, we're going to dig into Drum Machine Designer because Drum Machine Designer has seen some serious work under the hood, and now it is banging. Pun intended. But first things first, Drum Machine Designer is not a software instrument itself. Really, it's just a container for other software instruments. But up until now, the entire underpinning for Drum Machine Designer was Ultrabeat. So it just kind of seemed like this weird in-between middleman between you and Ultrabeat. But with 10.5, that has all changed because no longer is Ultrabeat the underpinning for Drum Machine Designer, though you can use Ultrabeat if you want to. In fact, Drum Machine Designer can use any style of instrument within it. In fact, let's just take a look at my Atlanta kit in this session. And if we open the mixer, we can see that there is now a dedicated software instrument for each and every channel strip, most of which is Quick Sampler. But we also have Ultrabeat. We can also have things like the ES2, and we can even have third-party instruments as well. In fact, just to demonstrate this, let's solo this kit and let's take a quick listen to the kit itself. Cool. Let's now load a third-party drum sampler. So on the kick here, I'm going to load up Battery from Native Instruments. And let's now load just any one of the kits here. So we should now hear a battery kick in this drum part. I suspect that is going to make a lot of people very happy. So let's kind of back out of here, keep our Quick Sampler instrument for the time being. The other cool thing when it comes to Drum Machine Designer is if we open a new software instrument track and we dive into the instrument input section, we now have Drum Machine Designer in the drop-down menu, so we can actually select it as an instrument. And this will load up the empty kit. The one thing I did notice is if we open the new tracks dialog, at the moment, Drum Machine Designer is not part of this drop-down menu, but hopefully that'll change in the near future. Let's take a quick look at the interface of Drum Machine Designer here. Now, things don't look too much different at the moment. We still have each individual pad for each sample, and the bottom half of the window is still a set of smart controls. And each of these smart controls here interact with one of the plugins on the top level of this track stack. So if I turn on the drive, we've turned on the Fat Effects, turn it off, turn on the compressor, crush, and we can dial each up or down. But things get a little more interesting when we start selecting each of the individual pads themselves. So if I select the kick here, we have yet again a set of smart controls that we can interact with, but not all of these smart controls are related to plugins on the kick drum channel strip. And if we take a look over here, we have 3 new tabs for each pad. We have the pad controls, and we have a Quick Sampler main view, which is the main waveform view of Quick Sampler that's built into Drum Machine Designer. Finally, we can interact with the samples that we load into Drum Machine Designer. We can edit the start and end time of each sample. We can add a fade if we want. You can set the snap to either zero crossing, transient, or beat. If I deselect some of the tags that I've adjusted, we can play back either forward or backwards, which is amazing. And we can even sync the sample to the project tempo. So let's set this back to where it began. And we also have the Quick Sampler detail page as well, which is the LFOs, the pitch, the filter. This is just a whole new level of control. So we're seeing different parameters from the instruments themselves within the window. So if I go back to the kick pad controls here, and I turn up the pitch up to 12, we can see in the detail page, the course under pitch of Quick Sampler has been adjusted. If I set this back, go back to the pad control, pitch is back at 0. So there's a whole new level of depth that's occurring when it comes to Drum Machine Designer. It's very, very cool. And in fact, let's open the big room kit that I have down here. And let's open Drum Machine Designer. And let's go find a shaker track. And if we select Drum Synth, we now have Drum Synth within Drum Machine Designer. That's what's going on here. Everything's being integrated. This is a whole new level of awesome. Now, this is a good time to bring up Drum Synth because it is sick. Drum Synth is a streamlined, more accessible version of Ultrabeat's synthesis engine. And we have different groups of instruments we can choose from and different instruments within each group. So let me solo this big room kit for now. We have the shaker track, and we have different parameters for adjusting the tone of the instrument, the envelope of the instrument, adding dirt or saturation. And let's just hear this percussion track right now. And within the dropdown, we can choose from kicks, snares and claps, percussion, hats and cymbals. And within each group, we can select a different instrument. So we have a shaker here, but maybe I want a cowbell. Or maybe I just want to pick a different instrument altogether. So let's select some claps here. Which is just amazing. And then let's break open the big room kit here and go find that drum synth track. So we have our shaker, but we've set it to a human clap here. Let's now switch it to Ultrabeat. So if you start out with drum synth, but decide later that you want to have the full capacity of Ultrabeat for fine-tuning your sound, all you need to do is swap drum synth for Ultrabeat, and the sound is loaded into Ultrabeat. It's very, very cool. Between all of these new amazing innovations, I took a little time to create a riff. And, just check it out. I've loaded up different instances of Drum Machine Designer, adjusted the kit, used the step sequencer to adjust my patterns. So if we take a look at this bass patch here, and we open the edit mode lanes, I've adjusted velocity, gate, tied certain notes together, adjusted the start offset of different notes. And this has been a ton of fun. I actually used Quick Sampler to sample one of the new sounds of the huge new array of electronic drum kits that we now have to pick from, which is just fantastic. There's just so much more versatility in the electronic drum kit world. And just check it out. Take a listen real quick. I'm finding these new features to be an amazing source of inspiration and workflow. So we should now probably examine how to load samples into Drum Machine Designer because things have changed quite a bit in a way that's very helpful. So let's start out with our empty drum kit here. And as you can see, we have an empty set of pads and we need to load some samples onto these pads. Now to start, we can select from the library itself. If I open the library, you can see that for each pad that is selected, the library updates for the type of sound that would typically be placed on that pad. So for the kick here, I could pick this Autumn Leaves kick, and it's now loaded up within the sampler. We open the track stack here. We can see we now have a channel strip for the kick. And we have the quick sampler where we can adjust the sample itself, make any sort of adjustments with LFOs and pitch. But what if you have samples that you want to load into Drum Machine Designer? So let's just clear out this cell for now. I'm going to bring in the Finder, and I have a selection of samples I'm going to drag into Drum Machine Designer. Let's drag it in. Now, if I start in the bottom left-hand corner, or any cell for that matter, the samples will be loaded across the pads chromatically. So check it out. Cool, so there's a lot of things updating here. But let's open the mixer. Open this empty kit. We now have a channel strip for each of these samples. And they're all loaded with Quick Sampler. And if we select a pad, we can go into the Quick Sampler main tab and start adjusting for our sample. So let's set the snap to transient, edit the beginning, bring the end in, and let's now set it to zero crossing, and we can zoom in. So let's zoom in on the sample, add a fade, check it out. So that's our clap. We can do the same thing for each of the kick and the snares. Once we've gone through and fine-tune our samples, let's now rename each pad. Double click, clap, kick, snare 1, and snare 2. Now perhaps these are not in the order that you would prefer for your samples, we can change them around, whether it be visually or actually remapping them to the keys chromatically. So let's just head up to the top here, and there's a new gear icon in the top of the Drum Machine Designer. Dive in. We can reorder pads either by changing the sound themselves and the key relationship or just visually. So let's start with visual. If I move the snare over, it's on D sharp to begin with, and the input remains at D sharp. Move it back, D sharp still. Go back to the gear, go to reorder pads, and let's change the sounds. So now let's move this kick where the clap is. Drag it over. The kick is now mapped to C1 and the clap has been swapped to C sharp. So let's drag over the snare, other snare. Beautiful. So now we have a kit exactly the way we would prefer it to be ordered. In my preference, it's to be mapped out the same as the Logic electronic drum kits. We can also drag loops onto the pads themselves. So let's open the Apple Loops browser, and I'm going to look for something that's not an audio file. Let me select the pattern loops and bring up Drum Machine Designer again. And let's bring in any of these beats. They're patterns. They're not audio files, but check it out. Drag this in. And now it has been loaded onto its own channel strip with Quick Sampler and it's been analyzed. And we can set it up with classic mode, one shot, or even slice. Now, if you have a loop that you want to dice up across the different pads, I don't necessarily recommend this style of loading a loop into Drum Machine Designer. So let's back out of here. Let's close the plugin. Let's close the loop library. Close our mixer. And now I have a drum loop here that's an audio file. And let's unmute this region. Let's now right-click on the audio file and let's go to Convert to New Sampler Track, or you can find it in the Convert section down here. We now have a new array of options for converting to sampler tracks. We can choose a sampler, which would be the old EXS-24. We can choose Alchemy now for synthesis and Drum Machine Designer. I'm going to make sure to pick transient markers so the different transients are diced up across Drum Machine Designer. Here we go. And just like that, we have our new Drum Machine Designer instance with the sample chopped up across the different pads here. So let's solo it and check it out. And you can see that all these samples are diced up along one instance, it appears, of Quick Sampler. Let's just take a look at the mixer here. Very cool. We have Quick Sampler for each channel strip, but they all seem to be related to one instance. But this is fantastic because we can pick our sounds and then zoom in on the waveform, fine-tune the start and end of each sample, fade in, and exactly get it the way we need it. As you saw, we can rename each sample, so we can call this kick. We can give each pad a new icon by control-clicking or right-clicking, and then selecting Assign Track Icon. So cool, let's pick out a kick drum for this one. Wonderful. And if you load up your own samples in a Drum Machine Designer, we can also save it as a patch in the library. We can select pad by key. So let me select this and press any key on my keyboard here. We've loaded up this particular sample within the bottom half of Drum Machine Designer. Or we can select a channel strip by pad. So check it out. We can now see that the kick drum channel strip has been selected within the mixer. Very awesome. After that, we can also close or open the library from within Drum Machine Designer and a whole variety of other options as well. I hope you can agree with me that this update to Logic Pro 10 is fantastic, and in my opinion is exactly what needed to happen for Logic Pro 10. We now have tools for any genre of music. Whether you play rock music, we have guitar amps, we have bass amps, we have drummers. If you're into hip hop, we have a robust set of electronic drum kits to pick from. We have samplers that are easy to work with, and even a dedicated drum synth instrument so you can play kick sounds up and down the keys and they're pitched to each key. And for electronic music, we have live looping, we have new patterns. It's just amazing how much has appeared with 10.5. So I hope this has been helpful for you. If it has, as always, I highly suggest subscribing to the YouTube channel, Why Logic Pro Rules, or subscribing on the website itself, whylogicprorules.com. Every week, I'm posting new videos, new emails, and new posts to help you get the most you can out of Apple's Logic Pro 10. Thanks so much.